ideas, and that kind of gets put in and kind of helps the whole process.
And this was, I think one of the things that we talked about early on with Michael was the sense that there was going to be a sense of a real military credibility to the way that the Transformers had secretly been integrated into the world, and that, if you show them at a base and you show that there are true protocols designed to protect them and keep them secret, and you play the scenes with the military, the briefing scene, just as you would in any kind of typical military movie, it would make everything ultimately, again, feel more real. And this was a scene that, we rewrote a bunch of times as well, because there's a weird tonal collision between the being real and then the fun of giant robots.
Well, and negotiating with the Pentagon and the military itself, and how they are portrayed, and how we portray conflict within their ranks, which is a very touchy subject.
Yes.
And also while doing it, with this animated element of the Transformers.
Yeah, we actually thought that they were going to kick back very hard.
They've been very good to us.
They were, and we thought they were going to kick back very hard, just on the idea of, a guy who had come in, kind of a suit who'd come in and ended up not only kind of taking over a major military aspect of the movie, but, as Bob said, dissension among their ranks. And they were wonderful in that they said, look, the key is that you have to portray us as accurately as possible in the context of the story, and you have to make sure that the reasons for Lennox and his team ultimately going rogue are right. Then you go back and forth about a lot of the language that's used, but they were very gracious with us about that.
You learn a lot, and it's fascinating.
It is really fascinating. I mean, literally, once you have support of the military, they are moving super carriers to a location to help you shoot a movie.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And this is the third movie that we've made with the military.
Yeah, I remember in the hotel room with Aaron, it's like, okay, we'll get started on Act 1. You figure out where to move our super carrier battle group. Are we sending it to San Diego?
Yeah. The scene. I mean, it really is one of those, again, major credit to Michael in that you kind of sit down to write a briefing scene with a giant robot in a hangar, and you're like, what is this going to look like? And building that scaffolding and then getting the camera to be able to move through that space that way it just gave it so much dimension and life. I think that's one of the things that we really appreciate about working with Michael, is that he immerses you in the feeling of a world in a very unique way.
And just to iterate, when we say we, Aaron Kruger, who simply isn't here because he's not the kind of attention-grabbing egomaniac that you and I are.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even live in Los Angeles. He's one of those amazing screenwriters
Sorry, interrupted.
who's got a secret identity as a screenwriter in his town because flies off.
Definitely one of those scenes that I'm having bad flashbacks right now, just because the balance of all the information and making it track, and asking ourselves, is this a scene that people are going to want to live in for very long? And yet
what do you need to know?
What do you need to know? And yet it's totally required, because the choice to start a movie in the middle of action requires you to come to a point somewhere in Act 1 where you backfill the audience on what's been going on. It's the price that you pay narratively. So
luckily we have Optimus Prime there.
Right, you do have a giant robot
that
giving you the information.
A little bit,
yeah, that is always a nice little card to be able to pull. A lot of the kind of thrust behind Galloway. Aaron was very early on in the process said, we're going to need a Galloway in this movie, and here's what I think Galloway needs to be arguing. His argument needs to be that the only reason to justify the reemergence of the Decepticons is that they're here to hunt the Autobots, period. And hang the whole, we want you to leave the planet on something like that.
That they may have to leave their new home.
That I think before we even had a full story, knew we had to write. The scene of your parents dropping you off at school. Just knowing what Ron and Judy are capable of, and what how they were in all the scenes in the first movie. We've all gone through that experience if you've gone to college of, having your parents drop you off, and the weird mix of embarrassment and longing that you feel, and knowing that they're going to leave you on your own for the first time.
People that have been to college, when you meet the roommate, I remember this day when I went into Wesleyan University, meeting my roommates. My roommate was a deadhead. I didn't know what a deadhead was, because I'm from Los Angeles. I just didn't know what a deadhead. But I met my roommate. He turned out to be a very nice guy. He was a deadhead. It was not fun when the Grateful Dead actually had concerts in Connecticut, and he had no less than 20 deadheads sleeping in his room on the floor. I remember I had to go into, because I had the inside room, it was the double room, and the stench of, I don't know what they were smoking, was wafting into my room, and I had to get into my room, but his head was like in my doorway, and I had to get rid of that stench. So I had to slowly push the door against his head and push him back into the other room to shut the door. Anyway, so college, this brings me back when you meet the roommate. Is a new actor on the scene, I guess. I found him after looking at so many people. Yes, it was true, we were considering Jonah Hill for this role. But, I feel this worked out really well with Ramon. He was the cool guy that could go on the ride, and he was the audience member. He's the audience for, experience Transformers for the first time. So he's basically like in Transformers 1, he's that kind of vehicle that the audience can experience what is the first time feeling from when they saw these things. Whatever, Ramon, he does have a real kind of natural way about him. He's cool. He's a very mellow guy. He got along with Shia very well. So it felt, through rehearsals, it just felt like we were able to kind of play with this a lot. And he works very hard as an actor. The chemistry between Shia and Ramon was very good, and especially the chemistry that he has with John Turturro.
Although it's set up here, we knew that we were going to bring back Agent Simmons, and the tricky thing was that we knew that Simmons couldn't really come into the story till quite late, given everything that needed to happen, and yet you needed to find a way to connect him organically so that when he showed up it wasn't just a total shock. And that led us to the idea that it would be great if Leo had a rivalry with
another website that scoops alternative news, and that would be something that Simmons had been doing. He's an insider within the website.
And, the idea was to build on, he was obviously a paranoid alien hunter in movie 1, so if he had since been fired, what would he become if he were out there in the world? And that led us to the idea that he was he was Leo's rival.
There are various people like that who've written books who claim to have been working in various classified places, like Robert Lazar.
What makes this movie accessible to everybody, and that's how you have such a gigantic age range to see this movie. And that's more of a 4-quadrant movie, from kids to older adults. I think this movie brings a kid out in you.
Fun compromises were we'll keep it subtle, innuendo, it'll be like, these are green brownies from these nice Hawaiian kids, da-da-da. And then improv takes it to, Judy, it's reefer.
Some the joke, others
Some
might say
crosses the line, others might say, we just say it's symbiotic compromise.
Now, we had a whole scene here between Sam and Alice, and we had a lot of conversations with Michael about, we had ultimately different kind of philosophical approach to the way we were going to play Alice, but the idea was ultimately that Alice is this essentially sweet girl at the beginning of the movie. You would not see coming what was coming, and that she was able to engage with him, and it was a much more subtle thing going on there,
and a much more genuine threat to Michaela that way, in a way, from one point of view.
Sorry, interrupting me.
Now instead, she shows up immediately as a
Sam Humper,
as a sultry vixen, Terminatrix.
Yes, it's funny because, again, it goes back to setting the tone for these movies, and
she does manage just to do that with one look. So credit to
Isabel,
the amazing ability to actually convey all that.
Yeah. The thing is, I think that even if Michael had shot that scene as we had all initially conceived of it, it's still extremely likely that we would have ended up cutting it because there was so much story.
It would have been too long.
Yeah.
We would have had to lose other things, like this amazing jaguar coming out of the water.
Yeah.
I love this scene. I like the stealthiness of it. To why Transformers can be creative and fun for a director, because it's like, okay, well, how can we get into this then? How can we make something so small? And of course, why not have little ball bearings that go down that are little micro robots that form into a thin little robot? To me, it's just a very fun scene. Little balls right here. This is a magnetic floor where I had magnets, and I'm actually controlling some of them underneath this floor, controlling this little ball bearing. It was truly one of the more fun scenes to shoot in this set because we had this 10-foot magnetic floor, or actually a steel floor with magnet.
Coming soon.